Millionaire hires a fake wife to cover his mother's eyes. He's shocked because she's so beautiful. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain had just started falling over the city, soft at first, then harder, until the streets glistened under the dim yellow light of the old lamps. A young woman hurried along the sidewalk, clutching a worn leather bag to her chest as if it held her entire world. Her name was Emily. She had grown up on the other side of town, far from the glass towers of the financial district, and tonight her shoes were soaked from puddles that kept seeping through the thin soles. Emily worked 2 jobs. By day she was a cashier at a small grocery store, and by night she served tables in a family restaurant. Even with the long hours, she was struggling to cover her younger brother's medical bills. She had promised him that he would get the treatment he needed, no matter what it cost her. That promise kept her going, even on nights like this, when exhaustion pressed on her shoulders like bricks. On the other side of the city, in a penthouse that seemed to touch the clouds, Michael sat in silence. He was 32 years old, a self-made millionaire who had turned a small startup into a powerful company. Success had given him wealth, but it had also chained him to expectations he despised. His mother, a proud and traditional woman, wanted him to marry into a family of equal status. She feared scandal, she feared gossip, and more than anything, she feared that her only son would fail to secure a legacy. Michael's jaw tightened as he reread the message on his phone. His mother had arranged another dinner for him, another introduction to a woman from a wealthy family. This had been the 5th time in less than 2 months. He knew that refusing again would mean another long lecture, another round of disappointment in her eyes. He cared for his mother deeply, but he had no interest in a loveless marriage built on status. That night, fate began to weave its strange pattern. Emily, desperate for extra money, had posted an online ad offering part-time help for odd jobs. She expected babysitting or tutoring, maybe cleaning or running errands. What she did not expect was a call from a man who spoke with calm authority, offering a proposition so unusual that she almost laughed. The next evening, Emily found herself walking through the polished marble lobby of a skyscraper, her reflection scattered across the towering glass. She felt completely out of place in her simple dress, but she held her head high. When the elevator doors opened, Michael was there, waiting. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he looked like the kind of man who had never known the word struggle. His eyes were sharp, yet there was a flicker of curiosity when they landed on her. "You must be Emily," he said, his voice low and even. "Yes," she answered, trying not to let her nerves show. He studied her for a long moment before gesturing for her to follow him into his office. The city stretched out beneath the tall windows, glowing with countless lights. But Emily felt like she had stepped into another world. Michael leaned back in his chair. "I am going to be direct. My mother believes it is time for me to marry. She has been relentless. I need someone to play the role of my wife for a short time, just until things settle down. Nothing more." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "You want me to be your fake wife?" "Yes," he replied simply. "It would be temporary, and you would be well compensated. There will be rules. You will not interfere with my personal life, and I will not interfere with yours. We will only act as husband and wife in front of my mother." Her heart pounded. The idea was absurd, dangerous even, yet the mention of money pulled at her like a rope. Her brother's face flashed in her mind, pale and tired from long hospital visits. She thought of the unpaid bills stacked on her kitchen table, each one heavier than the last. Michael watched her carefully. He had expected hesitation, maybe even refusal. But he had not expected the quiet strength in her eyes. She was not dazzled by his wealth or his office. She was calculating, weighing, deciding. Finally, Emily spoke. "If I agree, it is because I need the money. Nothing more." And if you agree," Michael said, leaning forward, "it will be because I need my mother to believe in a story. Nothing more." Their eyes locked. In that moment, 2 strangers, bound by desperation and pride, began a dangerous bargain. Neither of them knew that what started as a contract would lead to something neither power nor money could control. Emily sat across the polished desk, her hands resting on her lap, her posture straight though her heart was racing. The room was quiet except for the hum of the city far below, muffled by the glass walls that stretched from floor to ceiling. Michael had not moved since he laid out his offer, his gaze steady, his tone calm, as if he were discussing nothing more unusual than a simple business deal. Emily drew in a breath, steadying herself. "What exactly are the terms?" she asked. Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on the desk. "There will be clear boundaries. You and I will appear as husband and wife, only when my mother or close relatives are present. Outside of that, our lives remain separate. No interference, no expectations. This is an arrangement, not a romance." The words struck Emily like a splash of cold water. She nodded slowly. "And how long would this arrangement last?" 3 months, Michael answered without hesitation. "By then my mother will believe that I have chosen for myself, and the pressure will ease. When the time comes, we will part ways. You will be free and well compensated." The way he spoke was firm, precise, almost rehearsed. He had clearly thought through every detail before she arrived. Emily shifted in her seat, her fingers brushing against the thin strap of her worn bag. She wondered if he saw the wear in her clothes, the exhaustion in her face, the weight of her worries pressing against her small frame. Michael's eyes flicked to her hand and back to her face. "You will need to play the role convincingly. My mother is sharp. She notices everything. If she senses a lie, the entire plan falls apart." Emily met his gaze. "And what happens if she does?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Then it will not only be my reputation at risk, it will be yours too. People like my mother, they do not forgive easily." The warning hung in the air. Emily swallowed hard, but the thought of her younger brother in the hospital pressed harder than her fear. The bills were waiting, the doctors growing impatient, and the medication that kept him stable was running low. She could not afford hesitation. Michael stood and walked to a small drawer in the cabinet by the window. He returned with a document clipped neatly together. He placed it in front of her on the desk. The title read, "Marriage Agreement Contract." Every line was printed in sharp black ink, detailing expectations, limitations, and compensation. Emily picked it up, scanning the words slowly. The terms were strict, leaving no room for misunderstanding. She would be required to attend family dinners, formal gatherings, and a few social charity events. She would live temporarily in his residence when needed to make the illusion stronger. She would keep her personal life private, and under no condition would she reveal the truth. Her chest tightened as she reached the section marked Payment. The number was staggering, more than she could hope to earn in 2 years, working both of her current jobs. Enough to erase every debt, enough to cover her brother's treatment with some to spare. For the first time in months, she felt the faint flicker of relief rise through her chest. Still, there was a weight in her throat as she lowered the papers. "You really think you can buy your way out of marriage?" she asked quietly. Michael's expression remained unreadable. "I am not buying my way out. I am buying time. My mother is relentless, and this is the only way to control the situation without destroying the fragile peace in my family." Emily hesitated, then let the papers rest back on the desk. She knew that signing them would bind her into a world she had no place in, a world of wealth, reputation, and scrutiny. But she also knew that not signing them might cost her the person she loved most in this world, her younger brother. Michael slid a pen toward her. "You do not have to decide tonight. Take the contract, read it carefully, and come back tomorrow with your answer." Emily looked down at the pen, then back up at him. For a brief moment, she saw past the suit, past the calculated calm. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of weariness that mirrored her own. She picked up the contract, tucking it into her bag. Her voice was steady as she said, "I will let you know." "Oh?" Michael gave a short nod, dismissing her politely. "The driver will take you home." As Emily stepped into the elevator, the weight of the papers pressed heavily against her side. Each floor they passed felt like a step deeper into a decision that could not be undone. By the time the doors slid open onto the quiet lobby, she knew that tomorrow would not be the same as today. And in the shadows of his office, Michael stood alone by the window, staring at the lights of the city. He had offered her a role in his carefully crafted lie. But what he had not admitted, even to himself, was the dangerous truth. For the first time in years, he was not entirely certain where this story would lead. The following morning, Emily sat at her kitchen table with the contract spread open in front of her. The thin curtains let in a pale light, falling across the words that seemed to stare back at her like a challenge. She had read them over and over until she nearly knew them by heart. Every clause, every rule, every restriction was now etched into her mind. And yet, when she thought of her younger brother lying in his hospital bed, pale and fragile, she knew there was only one choice she could make. By noon, she was standing once again in the tall building with glass walls, her worn bag clutched tightly against her side. The elevator carried her up with a slow hum, her reflection in the mirrored doors looking back at her with eyes that were steady despite the storm inside her chest. When the doors opened, Michael was waiting, as if he had known she would return. "I have made my decision," Emily said, her voice clear though her hands trembled slightly. She placed the signed contract on his desk. Michael picked it up, scanning the pages quickly, then setting it aside. He gave her a small nod. "Then it begins." Oh. The first test came sooner than Emily expected. That evening, Michael's mother had arranged a family dinner. Emily found herself standing in front of a grand mirror in a quiet room of the mansion, her heart pounding as she smoothed the borrowed dress a housemaid had brought her. It was soft, blue silk, far finer than anything she had ever worn. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Michael appeared at the door, his suit impeccable, his expression as composed as ever. For a moment his eyes lingered on her, not with the cold calculation she expected, but with a flicker of surprise. He masked it quickly, offering his arm. "Shall we?" Emily placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Do you think she will believe this?" "She has to," Michael replied. "Remember, confidence is everything." When they entered the dining hall, every head turned. The long table was lined with crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and plates that gleamed under the chandelier. At the far end sat his mother, dignified and sharp-eyed, her presence commanding the room without a word. "And who is this?" his mother asked, her tone smooth but edged with suspicion. Michael's grip on Emily's hand tightened slightly. "Mother, this is Emily, my wife." The words landed heavy in the air. Emily's chest tightened, but she forced a small, respectful smile. She lowered her head in greeting. "It is an honor to meet you." "No." Throughout the meal, Emily felt the weight of every glance from Michael's mother. The questions were sharp, subtle traps designed to expose a flaw. Where had Emily grown up? What did her parents do? What schools had she attended? Emily answered with calm honesty, never fabricating more than necessary. She spoke of her modest upbringing, her work to support her family, and her younger brother's dreams of becoming an artist. At one point, Michael's mother raised an eyebrow. "So, you come from very little. That must have been difficult." Emily met her gaze without flinching. "It was not easy, but it taught me the value of hard work and the importance of standing by family." Michael, who had been silent through much of the meal, glanced at her with something like respect flickering in his eyes. Later, as the evening wound down, Emily excused herself to the garden. She needed air, space to breathe away from the sharp eyes that seemed to see through her every word. She walked along the stone path, her fingers brushing the roses that climbed the walls. Michael joined her a few minutes later. "You handled her better than most people would." Emily gave a small laugh. "I am not sure she believes me. Or us." "She will," he said firmly. Then, almost softer, "You surprised me tonight." "How so?" "You were real. Most people in that room spend their lives playing roles. You did not." Emily turned to him, the night air cool against her skin. For the first time she saw past the cold mask he wore. There was a trace of vulnerability in his voice. A man caught between duty and desire, between family and freedom. In that moment, the line between acting and truth blurred. Emily's heart thudded harder, not from fear, but from something she could not name. And as Michael looked at her beneath the starlight, he wondered for the first time if this dangerous arrangement might awaken something neither of them had prepared for. The following weeks passed in a rhythm that felt strange to Emily. By day, she returned to her modest apartment, working her shifts and caring for her younger brother. By evening, she was sometimes called to Michael's mansion, or invited to stand by his side at dinners where wealthy relatives and business partners gathered. Every time she wore one of the elegant dresses chosen for her, she reminded herself that it was all an act. She was only playing a role. Yet with each passing day, the lines between performance and truth grew thinner. Michael, for all his cold composure, had moments that startled her. When she stumbled on the marble stairs one night, his hand caught hers instantly, steady and strong. When she grew quiet during a tense dinner, he leaned closer, asking softly if she was all right. Those small gestures stirred something in her chest that she fought to ignore. She could not afford to forget that their bond was signed on paper, not carved from love. But secrets never remain hidden forever. One evening, during a family gathering at the estate, the atmosphere shifted. The tall doors swung open, and a woman entered, elegant, radiant, with an air of confidence that demanded attention. Emily recognized her from the whispers she had heard. Isabella, the daughter of an influential family, and Michael's former fiancé. Michael, Isabella's voice was smooth, almost playful, yet laced with steel. I heard you finally married. Imagine my surprise when I received no invitation. The room went still. Emily's heart thumped painfully against her ribs as Isabella's sharp gaze landed on her. And this must be your bride, Isabella continued, approaching with measured steps. Tell me, where did you two meet? Or perhaps I should ask, how much did he pay you? A murmur spread across the table. Michael's mother stiffened, her face paling as her eyes darted between her son and Emily. Emily felt her breath catch. Heat rushed to her face, a mix of humiliation and fury. She wanted to protest, to defend herself, but her voice locked in her throat. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Enough, Isabella. His tone was firm, but the damage was already done. Every guest's eyes burned into Emily, weighing, judging, doubting. Isabella only smiled faintly. I did not mean to offend. I was merely curious. After all, she does not quite fit the image of your usual circles. Emily clenched her fists under the table. She wanted to walk out, to escape the suffocating air of suspicion, but she forced herself to remain still. She could not allow them to see her crumble. When the dinner finally ended, Emily retreated to the garden, her chest tight with anger and shame. The roses that had once seemed beautiful now looked sharp and cruel, their thorns glistening in the moonlight. Michael found her there, his face drawn with tension. Emily, she spun to face him, her voice breaking. Is it true? Am I just a lie to everyone? Am I nothing more than a contract to you? His jaw clenched. You know why we began this. That is not what I asked, she whispered. Her eyes stung, but she refused to let the tears fall. To them, I am a fraud. To your mother, I am a mistake. And to you, I am just convenient. For the first time since she met him, Michael looked shaken. He reached out, but she stepped back. Do not, she said firmly. Do not touch me as if this means anything. Silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. In that silence, Emily realized how fragile their arrangement truly was. One accusation, one piercing gaze from a woman like Isabella, and the fragile trust she had built could collapse entirely. Michael's voice was low when he finally spoke. Emily, I will handle this. She shook her head. You cannot erase what they already believe. Her steps were steady as she walked away, but inside her heart splintered. The world she had stepped into was too sharp, too cruel, and she feared that no matter how hard she tried, she would always remain the outsider, the imposter who did not belong. And behind her, in the shadows of the garden, Michael stood frozen, torn between duty, pride, and a feeling he could no longer deny. For the first time, the contract no longer felt like control. It felt like chains that bound them both, pulling tighter with every beat of his heart. The following morning, the mansion was silent except for the faint sound of footsteps on marble. Emily packed her few belongings from the guest room, her hands trembling as she folded the borrowed dress and placed it carefully back into the wardrobe. She could not bear the thought of wearing something that felt like a costume in a play where she was not welcome. When she descended the staircase, she found Michael waiting in the grand foyer. He looked as though he had not slept. Dark shadows lined his eyes, his usual composure cracked by the storm of the previous night. Emily, he said quietly, his voice rougher than she had ever heard. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her small bag hanging from her shoulder. I cannot do this anymore. Your world is filled with suspicion and judgment. They do not see me as a person. They see me as a fraud. Michael's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a steady breath, he stepped forward. Yes. It began as a contract. I asked you to play a role because I thought it was the only way to protect my peace and my mother's expectations. His voice dropped lower. But last night, when Isabella humiliated you in front of everyone, something changed. I realized that I was not angry because the plan was failing. I was angry because you were hurt. Emily's breath caught, but she shook her head. Do not say things you do not mean. This was never real. Oh. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded contract. With one sharp motion, he tore it in half, the sound of paper ripping echoing in the cavernous hall. The pieces fluttered to the floor between them. It was real enough for me to know this, he said firmly. I do not care about the contract anymore. I do not care about appearances. I will not let them treat you as less than you are. You deserve respect, Emily. And I will make sure you have it. For a moment, Emily simply stared at him, her heart thundering in her chest. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of false hope weighed heavy on her. You cannot change what they think of me, she whispered. Then let them think what they want, Michael answered. I am finished hiding behind lies. If I must stand against them all, I will. The conviction in his eyes shook her more than any words could. She had expected him to defend his pride, to defend his family's name, but instead he defended her. For the first time since their strange arrangement began, she saw him not as the untouchable millionaire, but as a man willing to risk everything for the truth. Emily's throat tightened. She turned away before he could see the tears forming in her eyes. I need time, she said softly. Michael let her go, his hands curling into fists at his sides. As the doors closed behind her, he felt the weight of the choice he had made. The contract was gone. The lie was broken. What remained between them was uncertain, fragile, but painfully real. And in that fragile truth, both of them stood on the edge of a future that neither had planned, but neither could ignore. Emily returned to her small apartment that evening, her steps heavy as if the weight of the mansion still clung to her. She placed her bag on the table, sat down, and buried her face in her hands. The sound of her younger brother's laughter from the other room brought a faint smile, but her heart remained restless. She had walked away, yet part of her still lingered in that grand hall where Michael had torn the contract apart. For the next few days, she threw herself into work, determined to silence the confusion with routine. At the grocery store, she rang up purchases with a tired smile. And at the family restaurant, she carried trays until her arms ached. But no matter how busy she stayed, the memory of Michael's eyes followed her eyes that for the first time had held no calculation, only sincerity. Meanwhile, in the towering office downtown, Michael faced storms of his own. His decision to defend Emily had reached the ears of his board members. Investors whispered about distraction, about weakness. Even his mother confronted him, her voice sharp and trembling with disappointment. You humiliated this family, she said. You chose a girl from nowhere over alliances that could have secured our future. Do you understand what you have done? Michael's answer was calm but unyielding. Yes. I understand exactly. I chose her because she is honest. Because she is stronger than anyone you have paraded before me. If that is humiliation, then I accept it. On. His mother turned away, her silence cutting deeper than any words. But the cost of his defiance grew heavier. The company began to feel the strain as rumors spread in the market. For the first time in years, Michael found himself questioned not for his business skills, but for his personal choices. One night, exhausted from endless meetings, he sat alone in his office, the city glowing beyond the glass. His thoughts drifted to Emily. He had freed her from the lie, but in doing so, he had also let her walk away. The quiet in the room pressed on him until he could no longer bear it. He rose, grabbed his coat, and left. Across town, Emily returned home late, her apron still dusted with flour. She stepped inside to find an envelope on the floor by the door. Her heart skipped when she recognized the elegant handwriting. Inside was a simple note. I am not asking you to play a role anymore. I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that what I feel is real, Michael." Her hands trembled as she read it again and again. A part of her wanted to tear it up, to protect herself from disappointment. But another part, the part that remembered the way he had looked at her in the garden, the way he had torn the contract without hesitation, whispered that maybe, just maybe, his words were true. She set the letter down, her chest rising and falling with a storm of emotions. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was dangerous, but the seed of something new had been planted. And whether she was ready to admit it or not, Emily knew her heart was already leaning toward him. Emily held Michael's letter in her hands for a long time. The words echoed in her chest, fighting against the doubts that clung to her like shadows. She knew what accepting his plea might mean: more scrutiny, more judgment, and perhaps more heartbreak. Yet she also knew that walking away completely would leave an emptiness she could no longer deny. 2 days later, as rain pattered gently on the windows of her apartment, Emily slipped the folded letter into her bag and made her way to the hospital. Her younger brother sat up in bed, sketching with a pencil, his face brighter than it had been in weeks. "Emily," he said, showing her a drawing of a city skyline, "one day I will build something like this, and you will not have to work so hard anymore." Her heart clenched with both pride and sorrow. She smoothed his hair and whispered, "As long as you keep dreaming, I will keep working." But deep inside, she wondered if Michael's presence could change more than just her burdens. That evening, Emily returned home to find a familiar car waiting near her building. Michael stepped out, rain glistening on his coat. His expression was steady, but his eyes carried a weight of longing. "I know you have every reason not to trust me," he began, his voice low against the sound of rain. "But I am not here to offer contracts, or money, or conditions. I am here to offer the truth." Emily's grip tightened on the strap of her bag. "And what truth is that?" "That I care for you," he said simply. "More than I expected. More than I can ignore. I tried to keep this as an arrangement, but I cannot pretend anymore. I tore up the contract because I wanted you to see that my choice is not business. It is you." The sincerity in his voice shook her. For a long moment she said nothing, her heart racing. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out the contract he had once given her. The pages were folded, worn from being carried back and forth, a reminder of the lie that had brought them together. "I kept it," she admitted softly, "not because I wanted to, but because I did not know if any of this was real. It felt like the only proof I had that what we shared even existed." Michael stepped closer, his hand extending gently. "Let me replace that proof with something better." From his pocket he drew a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple but radiant, its stone catching the dim light. "This is not a symbol of an agreement," he said. "It is a promise. I want you to wear this, not because you have to, but because you choose to." Emily stared at the ring, her breath caught. The memory of the fake band she had worn to fool his mother flashed through her mind. That had been a symbol of deception. This, however, was something else, an offering of truth. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Michael." But before she could finish, her brother's laughter echoed in her thoughts, and her mother-in-law's sharp gaze returned like a warning. The world around them was still filled with obstacles. The decision lay heavy in her heart. Michael waited, patient yet unyielding, holding out the ring as the rain poured harder around them. For Emily, it was no longer about contracts or survival. It was about trust, and whether she dared to believe that love could rise from a foundation built on lies. Emily did not give Michael an answer that night. She took the ring in her trembling hand but slipped it back into the box, whispering that she needed time. Michael respected her choice, though his eyes betrayed the weight of his hope. Days passed, and whispers spread quickly among the circles of wealth and power. Isabella continued her quiet attacks, seeding doubt about Emily's past and her place beside Michael. Business partners questioned his decisions, and his mother's silence was heavier than open disapproval. Yet through it all, Michael did not retreat. He stood firm, attending meetings with Emily at his side, making it clear that his choice was final. The tension reached its peak one evening at a charity gala, where the city's most influential families gathered. Emily wore a simple black gown, elegant yet understated, and Michael held her hand as they entered the grand hall. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned toward them. Isabella approached almost immediately, her smile sharp as glass. "How touching," she said, her gaze sliding over Emily. "But tell me, Michael, how long will this charade last? Surely you cannot expect us all to believe this fairy tale." Michael straightened, his voice calm but strong enough to carry across the room. "This is not a charade. Emily is the woman I have chosen, not because of her family name or her wealth, but because of who she is. And if anyone here doubts that, they can take it up with me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. His words were a direct challenge to the unspoken rules of their world, where alliances and fortunes dictated every decision. Emily's heart raced. She felt the stares, the judgment pressing down on her like a storm. Yet when she looked at Michael, standing tall and unshaken beside her, she felt something she had not felt in years' safety. Isabella's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "You risk everything for her. Your reputation, your company, even your mother's approval. Is she truly worth all that?" Michael did not hesitate. "Yes, she is worth all of it." The room fell silent. His declaration rang louder than any orchestra, louder than the clinking of glasses or the whispers of scandal. For once, the rules of wealth and power seemed to crumble beneath the weight of something stronger: truth. Emily's eyes burned with tears she fought to hold back. The gala continued, but for her, the world had narrowed to the man at her side, a man who had torn apart the chains of expectation, who had chosen her openly, without shame. Later, as they stepped out into the night air, Emily finally let out the breath she had been holding. She turned to Michael, her voice soft but steady. "You did not have to do that." "I did," he replied, "because I will never again let you stand alone." In that moment, Emily realized that his promise was no longer just words spoken in the heat of defiance. It was a vow forged in action, in the face of ridicule and loss. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that love, real love, might truly be possible. The days after the gala moved slowly, but something had shifted. Michael's open declaration had silenced many of the whispers. Some people still gossiped in corners, but others began to see him with a new respect, not as a man controlled by family politics, but as a leader who dared to follow his heart. Emily, however, remained cautious. Though her heart swelled with every word Michael had spoken, she feared that his mother's silence was a storm waiting to break. That storm came one evening when Michael invited Emily to dinner at the mansion. His mother sat at the head of the table, her eyes steady, her face unreadable. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, she placed her fork down and looked directly at Emily. "I was harsh," she admitted slowly. "I believed that love could only exist within the boundaries of wealth and tradition. But at that gala, I saw something I could not deny. I saw my son standing taller than he ever has, not because of money or power, but because of you. Perhaps I was wrong." Emily's throat tightened, her hands trembling in her lap. She opened her mouth to respond, but Michael's hand found hers beneath the table, steady and warm. His mother's voice softened. "If you are the one who gives him strength, then you have my blessing." Tears blurred Emily's vision. For the first time since stepping into Michael's world, she felt the crushing weight of judgment lift from her shoulders. That night, after his mother left them alone in the garden, Michael turned to her beneath the silver glow of the moon. He reached into his pocket, bringing out the same velvet box he had shown her in the rain. This time, he knelt on one knee, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Emily, no contracts, no conditions, no lies. Just a promise. Will you marry me?" Emily's tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Yes." The ring slid onto her finger, gleaming like a promise finally fulfilled. Michael pulled her into his arms, and for the first time, there were no secrets, no roles, no walls, only love. Their story had begun as a bargain, a deception to satisfy a demanding world. But it ended with truth, with justice, and with the kind of love that no amount of wealth could ever buy. And in that moment, beneath the quiet night sky, Emily and Michael began the life they had both been searching for: real, unshakable, and true.